Well, welcome to Ravensdale Bible Academy. Today's course is Think Again Christian Fact Checking, and today's lesson is on this slide, Best Kept Secret. South Dakota did not shut down their state due to the coronavirus, and the results have been fantastic. Follow South Dakota proven science. So one of the issues that we're seeing during the COVID crisis is we keep hearing this statement, follow the science, follow the science. And it's really used as kind of like a trump card, right? When you're losing the argument, when you don't feel like you can thoroughly explain your position, then you just shut down and you just say, follow the science. Like that's some kind of magic bean. If I say follow the science, so what I'm saying is science is always right, science is never wrong. You just need to trust what the science is saying because the governors are just purely going by the science. They're not going by politics. They're following what's 100% right. The problem is it's not true, and we know it's not true, and we'll get into that as we fact check. And part of the problem is, well, what science are we following? Are we following the science of Florida? Are we following the science of Texas? Are we following the science of California, Washington? Or are we following the science of South Dakota? Are we following a science by faith, or are we following a proven science? And so during the COVID crisis, we've seen various states with different approaches really to guard against the spread of the coronavirus. When it began, we didn't really know what it was. It was the threat of the Black Plague. It was the threat of millions of people dying. And so certainly we needed to take precautions. We needed to make sure that we protected our citizens. And so the governors of each state in America essentially had their own way of going about protecting their citizens. And so there were states that closed businesses and issued stay-at-home orders and demanded masks and no social gatherings. Only two households could get together, no singing, don't celebrate Thanksgiving, don't celebrate Christmas, kind of that kind of a thing, right? Strict lockdowns. And then we had other states that, they open business, they had curfews, but, they weren't as strict as others. And we have South Dakota that resisted those orders. They resisted the stay-at-home. They resisted closing down businesses, and so we had a lot of variances between the states. Most states went on pretty severe, harsh lockdown mode in order to protect the families. I think that was a big part of it. What we saw as we tended to move month by month was this either became or, and I hope not, was originally very political to start with. So the fact remains to be seen on that. But one of the reasons why fact checking is so important is because data can be manipulated. The facts can be twisted. You may hear this statement, figures don't lie, but liars configure. And so one of the things that we want to look at is, well, here's statistics, here's real data. And then this is almost a year into it as of February 4th, 2021. South Dakota had a 0.016% chance of dying if you got coronavirus in their state. Now, throughout the country, the statistic is 0.0173%. So South Dakota is doing better. South Dakota is doing great. Now, here's what we have to process. If I have a state that has strict lockdowns, can't go to business, can't go to schools, got to wear a mask, can't sing in church, can't go to church, can't celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they have a higher chance or rate of dying than a state that doesn't do it. Now, you would think the state that doesn't do it would actually, they should have a much higher death rate because they're not complying. But the facts remain to be true that South Dakota is one of the best states in the country. Now, here's part of the other thing that we have to be careful of when we're studying data and facts. We've had almost 12 months to look at. So when we keep stats, what month are we tracking? Is it possible that I could say, well, the total percentage of the mortality rate or the risk of dying for South Dakota was 0.016%? Or can I take the worst month in the year at the pinnacle of it, the end of November, beginning of December, and then only use that month to isolate South Dakota? And so what you see here is ABC News says South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem says lockdowns are useless, right? So the governor of South Dakota says lockdowns are useless. What this article is suggesting is that she's a fool because COVID-19 cases are soaring. And so she defends her hands-off approach in managing the pandemic. So the heading of this article is very misleading, and it's an attack. Our question is South Dakota the proven scientific state that we should be following? Is it the best kept secret? Or are they killing people? And so if you were to look at this article, you would assume that, oh, they're not doing it the right way. She's incompetent. She's hurting her people. But you'll notice the date is October 6th. They're just isolating on one time period during this whole pandemic. Let me give you an example of how figures don't lie, but liars can figure. South Dakota is a small state. So let's say one out of every 10 people were to get the virus and die. That means 10% of their population. You take a bigger state, let's say they had 100 people and 10 people were to die. Well, it's the same percentage. It's 10%. They're equal. But watch now how I can twist the facts. Now I can say 5 people in South Dakota died out of 10. That's 50%. That's half. Half the people in South Dakota are dying. I can take the same 5 out of 10 in another state and say, it's only 5%. Do you see how those numbers can be twisted and manipulated? Now, I do believe that the only way we can really gauge this is by the percentage, not by the total number, because we have states that have way more people, California, Texas, Florida, New York, than other state, Wyoming, South Dakota. And so we have to go by the percentage. And so percentages matter, but we have to be careful, because if in 1 month there's a spike, then percentagely it's going to look bad. That's why we have to take the longer approach. We have to look at more the 12-month cycle than just like 1 month. So before we get into comparing, one of the things that we really want to use as we're processing our determination of fact checking, we're trying to understand, is South Dakota the best kept secret? Is South Dakota a state that we want to follow? Is the governor's rules the rules we want to have? Have they proven that their method is better than Texas, or better than California, or better than Florida, or better than New York? That's our big question. Well, Does the Bible have anything to say about this? Well, one of the things we see in the Bible in Romans 13 is this: let every person be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. We know throughout the scriptures that it's God who places kings and princes and rulers. We see this in Daniel. We know that God is sovereignly in charge and control. And so as believers, we are called by scripture to submit to our governing authorities. Part of the problem that we've run into with this coronavirus is, well, we have many governing authorities. Which state's governor or 50 governors should we be following? Do you only follow the governing authority in your state? One of the things that we had to process with was, okay, we've got the President of the United States saying, go ahead and meet as a church. I've got the U.S. Constitution, which is the main law of our land, saying I have the freedom to gather, I have the freedom to worship. So I have the freedom to gather in a peaceful protest. So while we were watching protests in the street and people not social gathering, meanwhile our churches were closed down, even though we had a constitutional right to be open, just like people had a constitutional right to protest. So I had the president and I had the Constitution saying it's okay to open the doors for church. But I also had my state governor and my local mayor saying, no, it's not okay. So that becomes a dilemma as a believer. It's like, well, who do we follow? So we have to use some logic, because the law isn't specific enough. We have to use some logic because, well, we're getting a lot of different pieces of information, and that can become hard to process. So one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to take a look at the comparison for the whole year, and I wanted to also compare the state of South Dakota to the whole country. And so one of the things that I wanted to see was, well, can we see a time where, well, there's a greater spike, right? There's a greater spike, and so what we want to do is see, do things look the same? So here is South Dakota, and you'll see there's not much happening, and then all of a sudden a spike right here. Well, that's when NBC News says South Dakota is doing terrible. They had one bad month. When I come back over here and I go in November, it's like, well, wait a minute, the whole country was on the rise. In fact, and this is what we want to notice. There was a spike for South Dakota, and then what does it do? It went down again. It was very, very low to start. This seems like a bad time of the year, and then it went down. When we look at the United States already started out worse than South Dakota, and it was already higher at its percentage rate. And then here, this is about the same time period, right? It starts to go up, and it keeps going up, and it stayed high, whereas again, South Dakota went down. So if we were to just take that evidence, we would say, well, it looks like South Dakota is doing better than the aggregate average of the United States. And so the question is, well, why do we pay so much attention then to the states that are doing bad? New York, California. Well, I understand that bad news sells more. I understand that bad news gets a lot of attention. I understand that bad news in this case means death, and that's a serious thing, and we want to take notice and we want to be on guard so it doesn't happen to us. But should we be following them? Why are we following the mandates by failing states? Because that's really the question that's being asked. The best kept secret, the state, the governor that's being silenced is the state, South Dakota, that's doing the best. It's the best kept secret. Does that seem to be a true statement? Absolutely, because all we hear about are the worst states. All we hear from are the worst governors, Andrew Cuomo, Gavin Newsom. These are household names. And most people probably don't even know of Kristi Noem. Maybe she should be a hero. Nobody even knows her name. South Dakota goes completely unnoticed. Who should we be following? Should we be following states like South Dakota and Florida, who didn't go on massive lockdown and actually have better survival rates? Or should we be following failing states like California and New York? Should we be following the winners or the losers? Should we be following those who are successful or failing? The great mystery still remains. Why is South Dakota such a big secret? Think again, Christian.